Hey guys. Tonight we slip into the slow dusk of a world long buried in sand and silence. A place where rivers wrote stories, gods lived in clay and snacks. Well, they were oddly chewy. You're walking through the cracked mud streets of ancient Mesopotamia. The sun hangs low over the Euphrates, casting amber light on rows of crooked brick homes. The smell of warm barley gruel and date syrup hangs thick in the air. You probably won't survive this culinary flashback unless your taste buds have a soft spot for grain dust and salt bricks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals crunch over scorched gravel as you approach the first tablet. Not a glowing screen, not a library scroll, but a slab of clay scarred, cracked, and soot-kissed, etched with what looks like a poorly organized grocery list. But lean closer. The signs aren't just tallies of sheep or temple dues. Some of them list ingredients. Some describe preparation methods. Some, if your Akkadian is rusty, look like someone tried to write 3 pinches of cumin and instead summoned a demon. These tablets forgotten by most hold the whisperings of a surprisingly snack-obsessed civilization. And here's the kicker, they didn't call it snacking. But that didn't stop them from indulging between rituals during harvest breaks or while waiting for the neighbor to stop arguing with his donkey. Historians still argue whether the earliest Mesopotamian food texts were truly recipes or merely temple records of offerings, but there's enough overlap to imagine a bored scribe jotting down how to make his mother's lentil crunchies on the back of a legal complaint about stolen goats. One particular tablet, found half buried under a ziggurat in modern Iraq, carries a curious set of instructions. Boil grain dry in the sun crush, with mortar. Mix with date honey. Fold into small lumps. Offer 1 to Ishtar. Eat 3 yourself. That last line? Possibly a joke. Possibly a moment of honesty. Possibly the world's first documented kitchen snack theft. The kitchens of Mesopotamia were no Instagram playgrounds, no marble countertops, no cast-iron skillets hung with aesthetic lighting. They were open-air, smoke-choked, cluttered with clay pots that remembered too much heat. There were grinding stones for flour, wooden spoons with no handles, and fire pits that doubled as social commentary. Whoever had a decent hearth was automatically someone. In the middle of this stands you hunched over, squinting at a chipped bowl filled with something called kibtu. It's a mush of barley, sweetened with date juice and probably meant to be eaten with fingers, sticky warm, vaguely comforting. You take a bite. It tastes humble, like the kind of thing you'd crave if you'd been threshing grain in the 10 degrees of heat and arguing with the wind all day. One scribe known only by the nickname Feather Hand is rumored to have been obsessed with recording snack compositions. His tablets have been found from Nippur to Uruk, always buried under kitchen debris, as though someone got tired of his obsession and politely misplaced his collection. He once wrote, "If the date is hard, it must be boiled. If the bread is dry, chew slower. If the gods do not eat it, at least the dog will." Poetic practical, a little passive-aggressive. Quirky tidbit. Some of the recipes were carved alongside curse formulas, just in case someone tried to plagiarize a honey cake technique without proper tribute. One such tablet warns, "He who steals this preparation shall taste ash forever." Harsh but effective. You sit back now cross-legged on warm bricks listening to the distant sounds of reed flutes and temple drums. Somewhere a child giggles. Somewhere else someone burns a batch of barley balls and swears loud enough to wake the underworld. The sun sinks lower. Your fingers are sticky with date syrup, and the story of Mesopotamian snacking has only just begun. You wake up to the soft thud of barley bricks hitting the floor. No, not literal bricks though. Honestly, the texture's debatable, but dense little cubes baked from crushed barley sun-dried until firm and meant to be eaten like biscuits. If biscuits were designed for survival over taste, barley. In Mesopotamia is everything. It's food, it's drink, it's currency, it's mildly insulting if overcooked. You trudge through a village courtyard, the kind lined with drying mats where barley is spread thin as gossip. There's a faint smell of yeast and damp linen. A woman squats nearby, scooping dough into molds made from palm bark. These molds, shaped like squares, sometimes fish, once even like a tiny reclining god. That one was discontinued after too many complaints of chewing on the divine. The dough she presses isn't for bread. No, this is kasu, a humble barley-based puck made for snacking between plowing, during long boat trips, or while avoiding your in-laws during temple festivals. Each puck is roughly the size of your palm and weighs about the same as your last grudge. You bite into one. It's firm, not crunchy, firm. Like someone decided food shouldn't be fast or fun, it should be efficient. And yet, there's something oddly satisfying in it. A sweetness lingers from the barley's own sugars, perhaps caramelized in the drying sun. Some versions are mixed with fennel or coriander, giving a grassy, faintly licorice edge. Not quite delicious, but definitely chewable. The real twist. These weren't just casual snacks. They were often paired with beer. And not just any beer. Mesopotamian beer was thick, cloudy, and slurped through long reed straws from communal jugs. It looked like beige soup and tasted well like commitment. Historians still argue whether the snack, brick, and beer combo was a form of everyday refreshment or a laborer's version of Levins's. What's clear is that beer and barley bricks went hand in hand, sometimes literally, with vendors bundling them together in woven reed bags like an ancient Mesopotamian lunchbox. Picture a merchant yelling, "Buy 2 bricks, get a sip free," while waving a jug in one hand and swatting flies with the other. Quirky anecdote. There's evidence of barley snacks being used as mild bribes. One tablet records a temple guard receiving 3 barley bites in exchange for looking the other way as someone snuck a sheep through the back gate. The guard apparently claimed it was a religious sheep. Sure it was. But the real evolution came when someone had the bold idea to ferment the barley bricks slightly before drying them. Fermented dough meant more depth of flavor, or at least more intrigue, a funkier aroma. An accidental invention perhaps, but it caught on. Scribes even developed symbols to differentiate between freshly dried and left too close to the goat pen. You watch as a group of young boys play a game probably invented 10 minutes ago, tossing stale barley bricks into a jar from 20 paces. Each hit earns a cheer. One child eats a broken piece and winces. Another dares him to eat too. Peer pressure. Mesopotamian style. Nearby, an older woman smiles. She's carving her personal recipe into a broken tablet. Barley water, time, patience, and a little salt if you're feeling decadent. She pauses and adds, "Store above ground." Ants are loyal. That's experience talking. As the day warms, the courtyard fills with the aroma of baking grain. You sit beside a kiln watching the fire flicker through cracks and think, this is where the modern snack bar began. Not in a wrapper, not in a lab, but here under the sun in a clay oven crafted by hands who understood hunger time and the comfort of something dense in your pocket. The heat, the smell, the quiet rhythm of kneading and shaping. It's hypnotic. You close your eyes. The barley bricks are still hard, but the history, soft as flour. You're walking slowly now. Sun low behind your back. Sand curling around your ankles, and the scent of warm honey drifts toward you from the steps of a temple. Not the grand kind with towering pillars and chanting priests. This one is quieter, smaller, wrapped in fading flowers and little clay bowls, filled with what looks like dessert. Tonight's offering belongs to the moon goddess Nana, though depending on the city-state she might go by Sin, or have a cousin named Ishtar who borrows her eyeliner. What's being placed on the altar isn't incense or wine, or even that suspicious goat cheese from last week. No, tonight it's honey cakes. And not just any honey cakes. Soft, delicate rounds made with crushed wheat. Warm spices and the sort of syrupy sweetness that sticks to your fingers for hours and makes ants your new best friends. One priestess smooths the top of a cake with the back of her spoon. The batter flecked with sesame and a mystery spice that might be cumin or might be last year's dust bakes quickly on a flat stone warmed by the fire. You're handed one. It trembles in your palm like a pudding that gave up halfway through being a cookie. You take a bite. Oh, it's surprisingly good, moist, slightly tangy, faintly herbal. There's honey in it. Yes, but also dried fruit mashed until unrecognizable, probably dates or figs or both, in a quiet battle for dominance. And somewhere in there is a whisper of rosewater, a floral nudge that says, I may have been sacred once. Historians still argue whether these cakes were made specifically for temple rituals or if they started as everyday treats and slowly got elevated to divine status like your grandma's brownies making it to the church bake sale. But what's clear is that they weren't just symbolic. People ate them, people loved them, and in some cases probably elbowed each other politely for the last one. Quirky find. A fragment of a temple inventory from Ur lists 12 honey cakes slightly crushed by donkey. What became of those cakes, no one knows. But one scribe drew a tiny frown face in the margin, so it clearly mattered. You wander around the temple's back rooms, storage shelves packed with clay jars labeled only with symbols that might mean flour or stuff from the corner market. One jar's lid is sealed with wax, and inside a small bundle of dried pastry wrapped in reed leaves. It's a cake, older than your career decisions, and yet it smells faintly sweet like a bakery in a dream. You imagine a girl placing it there centuries ago, whispering a wish to the goddess, may love find me. May the harvest not be weird. May my cousin finally stop singing near the chickens. Simple things. In another room, there's a mural, faded, chipped, but still vibrant with golden ochre and soot-streaked blue. It shows a priestess holding a tray of cakes while the moon hovers above her, like a slightly judgmental cookie. These cakes mattered, not because they were trendy, but because they were shared, between people and gods, between past and present, between hands that knew how to knead, and hearts that needed comfort. You linger a while. Let the honey stick to your fingers. Let the quiet sink in. Then you take another bite. The cake crumbles softly. Somewhere nearby, a flute begins to play, and the goddess, she doesn't speak. But if you listen closely, the air is humming. You step away from the temple just as dusk rolls over the rooftops like a soft cotton sheet, and the scent that greets you next is far more assertive. It's sweet, yes, but also rich, sticky, and vaguely rebellious. That unmistakable scent of date syrup, known to the ancients as silin, bubbling in wide-mouthed clay pots over low fires, thick as gossip and twice as clingy. You follow the trail of warm, fruity fragrance through a maze of alleyways and into a courtyard where several women sit cross-legged grinding dates into pulp with stone rollers that double as arm workouts. Their sleeves are sticky, their fingers glisten, and there's laughter, low-tired, full of stories. One of them leans over a pot, stirs, and declares, "This one's for the gods and this one's for my husband because he thinks he's a god." You sit beside her and she offers you a spoonful of the dark, syrupy sludge. It's sweet, yes, but with a tang. Earthy. Like sugar that lived a life first. They pour it over barley cakes, mix it into porridge, drizzle it on grilled dates and roasted onions, which sounds strange until you try it, and then suddenly you're questioning your entire spice rack. And best of all, they bake it into crumbly flat pastries. You could tuck into your sash and munch while hiding from temple duties or pretending you're not crying during harvest season. Historians still argue whether date syrup was a luxury for the elite or a kitchen staple used across social classes. Some tablets suggest it was traded in sealed amphorae as a precious export. Others list it right next to 2 onions and 1 slightly suspicious goose. Either way, it was versatile, treasured, and absolutely everywhere. Quirky detail. One ancient poem references a man wooing his lover by offering her 3 figs of fresh reed mat and a cup of date molasses warmed by his armpit. Romance standards have shifted clearly. Back in the courtyard, a child is helping her grandmother mash the date mixture into small thumb-sized lumps. These are the mubadanutu bite-sized nuggets of pure sweetness rolled in sesame seeds, or chopped almonds if you had the silver for almonds. They're a bit like the ancient version of energy balls, portable, sticky, slightly over-sweet, and universally adored. You try one. It sticks to your teeth like a clingy X, but the taste, it hits that corner of your soul reserved for guilty treats and bedtime snacks. There's a hum of cinnamon or maybe cardamom, no one's sure. Recipes weren't exact back then. It was more of a taste and guess approach. There's a low shelf near the wall, and on it rests a series of clay tablets wrapped in linen. You peer at one. It's not a recipe, it's a dream journal. But in the corner, someone has scribbled, "Try the cakes with more salt next time." Sleepy innovation or divine suggestion? Hard to say. As the stars begin to blink awake overhead, you watch the last batch of syrup pour into a shallow dish to cool. It glistens like obsidian in firelight. A child tries to sneak a taste and gets gently swatted with a reed spoon. Another shrugs and licks the sticky remnants off his sleeve. And you find a quiet corner, sticky fingers, and the last of a cooling pastry crumb. And for a moment, in the middle of a city carved from mud brick and memory, the sweetness silences everything, even your thoughts. You're nudged awake not by a person but by the unmistakable scent of fried legumes. There's a breeze stirring the dust, a cat sleeping in a broken pot, and someone nearby humming off-key as they crush dried lentils like they owe them money. You shuffle over to a shaded stall near the market, where a woman in a faded linen robe is shaping small, irregular blobs of golden mush and plopping them one by one into hot oil. The result, lentil puffs. Crisp on the outside, soft on the inside, and almost scandalously addictive. You sit on a cracked bench, and before you can even say anything, a warm pouch made of woven reed lands in your lap. Inside 3 lentil puffs and a bonus crumb that may or may not count as a 4th. You pop one in your mouth. It crunches delicately like a fried whisper, then gives way to a nutty seasoned mash. There's cumin, maybe some garlic, possibly chopped onion that's been dried and ground into oblivion. And salt. More salt than you'd expect from a civilization that didn't have Doritos. These aren't full meals. These are market snacks, handheld and heartwarming, the kind of food you grab while arguing over sheep prices or pretending you've read the latest city edicts. Historians still argue whether these puffs were truly everyday street fare or associated more with festivals. Some stone carvings show what looks suspiciously like trays of them offered to minor deities, while others depict people sneakily eating near the stalls, like teenagers hiding fries from their siblings. You glance behind the stall, where a scribe sits on a crate scribbling furiously. He has ink on his nose and a streak of lentil paste across his tunic. He's known around the market as Ink Ear, and according to a whispered legend, once got into a 3-day argument with a priest over whether chickpeas were spiritually inferior to lentils. Spoiler, he lost. Quirky footnote. One old tablet, half erased and badly fired, contains a curse recipe claiming that improperly fried lentil puffs would summon minor demons of indigestion. Some scholars think it was satire. Others think it was the Mesopotamian equivalent of a Yelp review. You're handed another puff. This one has a little mint in it, unexpectedly cool and fresh in the middle of fried warmth. It's a revelation. The woman winks. Festival style, she mutters, as if you've just joined a very exclusive club. You notice the children playing nearby with puff-shaped stones, pretending to sell and eat them too. The game ends when someone tries to actually bite one and chips a tooth. There's some crying. Then more puffs. Peace restored. There's a rhythm to this snack life: make, fry, share, laugh, rest. It's not grand. It's not ceremonial. It's human. And that makes it sacred in its own small, crackly way. You lean back against the sun-warmed stall, puff in hand, smile forming. Somewhere, a scribe writes a poem about this very moment. It's badly rhymed, but utterly sincere. The sun has slipped behind the clay rooftops, casting long lilac shadows, and you follow a trail of roasted scent that feels somehow familiar. Nutty, toasted, and sweet in a quiet, grown-up way. You round the corner and stumble upon what looks like a cross between a granola-making club and a spiritual ceremony. On a flat-woven mat, 3 women sit surrounded by shallow baskets of ingredients. One pours honey, thick and golden and slow, over a mound of crushed pistachios and chopped dates. Another sprinkles toasted sesame seeds with all the reverence of a priest anointing a sacred text. And the third she's chewing, loudly, testing, she says, for balance. You settle down beside them as they start to knead the mixture into little squares and oblong bars. No baking, no fire, just pressure, patience, and extremely sticky fingers. Welcome to the ancient world's first granola bars. They're called kitmatu. In some records, though others refer to them simply as nutcakes or market lumps. Not the most appetizing of titles, but hey, they weren't printing glossy wrappers. These were made for portability, energy, and the occasional midnight craving in a temple storeroom. You take a bar. It's dense like the weight of unfinished tasks. You bite. The sesame hits first toasty and bold, then the pistachio earthy and complex. Finally, the honey-rich floral with a sharp tang that might be tamarind, or possibly just the cook's mood. Historians still argue whether these were common snacks or high-tier treats for the priesthood and elite. Some temple records list ingredients like imported nuts and expensive honey as reserved for ceremonies. Others casually toss them in between barley loaf for worker and goat stew for accountant, which, by the way, is now your new band name. Quirky little detail. One ancient complaint tablet. Yes, they had those involves a man writing to his neighbor about stolen nutcakes and the shame it has brought upon my household. He ends by saying, "Let this theft melt your teeth." Honestly, that feels like a very polite curse. Children aren't allowed to help shape the bars, but they hover nearby like bees, fingers twitching with hope. Once the batch is pressed and cooled, the cook slices off the ragged edges and flings them to the crowd like blessings. One piece hits a goat. The goat is delighted. You look down at your sticky fingers. The paste has hardened slightly, clinging like memory. You reach for another bar, not because you're hungry, but because it feels like holding time. A moment molded into sweetness. You rest against a half-crumbled wall, watching the stars wake up one by one. And somewhere a scribe tries to write crushed pistachio delight, but gives up halfway and just draws a very enthusiastic smiley face. The night deepens and the stars. Those ancient pinpricks of Mesopotamian poetry scatter overhead like misplaced breadcrumbs. You're walking slowly now, barefoot across warm stone toward the quiet hum of a cook fire that someone forgot to extinguish or didn't want to. Either way, it smells like roasted chickpeas. You settle near a merchant caravan preparing for dawn departure. Their camels are restless, their scrolls wrapped tight, but their cook, she's roasting chickpeas over a bed of glowing coals, humming a lullaby older than 3 empires combined. The sound of popping legumes fills the silence like polite applause from another century. You pick one from a shallow bowl. It's hot, slightly burnt, still crackling with heat. You pop it into your mouth. Crunch. It's exactly what your jaw needed after all the soft date syrups and sesame lumps. Roasted chickpeas seasoned with salt, thyme, and maybe a pinch of mystery spice. They're the popcorn of the cradle of civilization. Easy to make, easier to share, and even easier to spill in the sand. Historians still argue whether chickpeas were originally grown for ritual feasts or for everyday grinding and munching. Some records list them as offerings to underworld deities. Others just list 3 sacks toasted for caravan travel. You decide that ghosts and snackers aren't always so different. The merchant beside you explains that roasted chickpeas carcadanu in some dialects keep well for weeks. Good for trade journeys, temple pilgrimages, and extremely boring stakeouts. He offers you a small linen pouch tied with reed string. Inside enough. Crunch to survive a border tax inspection. Quirky fact. Unpreserved pouch of chickpeas was discovered inside the burial chamber of a mid-level accountant from the city of Sipar. Not a king, not a priest, just a guy who really wanted to make sure he had snacks in the afterlife. You toss another parchpibi into your mouth and lie back against a rolled-up rug. There's comfort in the repetition. The fire crackles. The caravan stirs. A camel sneezes. Someone begins passing around clay cups of spiced goat milk, because apparently this is Mesopotamia's version of hot cocoa. It's surprisingly comforting, a little funky, a little warm, like being hugged by a goat that also pays its taxes. You drink, you crunch, the night hums like a lullaby. You close your eyes as the chickpeas click gently in your pouch like edible maracas of the Bronze Age. And the cook fire still glowing, still whispering, still waiting for the next handful. Dawn creeps in like a nosy neighbor soft-footed, a little too curious and already judging your posture. You stretch groggy from too many chickpeas and goat milk dreams, and wander toward the scent of something sharp, savory, slightly sulfuric. It leads you to a narrow kitchen tucked behind a public grain hall where a man in a soot-stained tunic is flipping thick golden discs on a sizzling stone slab. Onion cakes, he grunts without looking up. For those who don't love themselves enough to eat figs, you're intrigued and also mildly afraid. He scoops one onto a flat shard of pottery and hands it over like he's doing you a favor that you won't appreciate until you're 50. It is still hot. The edges crisp and dark, the center soft and faintly green. You take a bite. It tastes like everything your breath fears but your soul secretly loves. Caramelized onions, garlic mash, a hint of wild leek, maybe a sprinkle of cumin, although it could also be despair. The cake's texture is chewy but solid, as if it was designed to endure long speeches or weddings you didn't want to attend, which fittingly is exactly where these were often served. According to some temple records, onion cakes were frequently part of communal feasts and rural gatherings, though usually as the last dish to be taken. Historians still argue whether this was due to unpopularity or simply because people knew better than to mix them with wine. One clay scribe famously called them wedding uninviters. Quirky mention. A letter from one jilted suitor in Babylon contains the line, "Your onion cakes haunt me still, as does your goat." Romance was complicated, apparently, but not everyone hated them. Some believed onion cakes helped balance the body's energy or ward off stomach demons. Though, to be fair, anything that pungent probably scared away more than ghosts. There's even a fragment of a folk song that includes the lyric, "If your eyes do not water, it is not yet the feast." In the corner of the kitchen, a small child is carefully shaping miniature versions of the cakes, pressing ridged patterns into them with a carved stick. It's the Mesopotamian version of plating. Aesthetics mattered even when the food smelled like morning breath wrapped in ash. You sip a bit of water because wine would be unwise and try a second bite. The flavor has mellowed. The garlic now hums instead of shouts. The onions are rich, almost sweet. It's a slow dance of flavors, one that improves with patience and lowered expectations. The cook finally looks up and nods. "Second bite always better," he mutters, "like marriage." You smile. He's not wrong. Outside, the marketplace is coming to life. Vendors call. Birds argue on rooftops. Somewhere, a donkey recites its morning grievances. But here in this strange corner of the culinary timeline, you eat something forgotten by history, remembered only by scent and stubborn scribes. And as your eyes water gently from a particularly aggressive bit of scallion, you feel oddly awake. Like history itself just pinched your nose and dared you to keep chewing. You retreat from the onion haze, your breath now a historical artifact in itself, and drift toward the city's edge. There's a tree line ahead where the land flattens into reed fields and the air shifts from acrid to sharp tart and fruity. You find a small gathering of foragers near a shallow stream, seated cross-legged, with woven baskets brimming with wrinkled brown pods and fat reddish berries. One woman beckons you closer with a crooked finger and offers you a dried fruit the size of your thumb. Tamarind, she says, sour enough to make the moon flinch. You hesitate. She smiles like a grandmother with secrets. You bite. Your mouth shrinks 3 sizes. It's sour. It's deeply tangy. There's something citrusy and earthy and wildly confident about it, like a fruit that doesn't care if you like it or not. You chew and slowly warmth seeps in behind the acid, a mellow sweetness like a wink after an insult. Another basket contains a handful of pale, twisty twigs, tamarisk branches, which some people chew for dental health. Others for the flavor, and one man claims he uses to ward off annoying cousins. You believe him. The children are busy rolling sour tamarind pulp into tiny snack balls coated with crushed herbs and salt. They call them shakatu tangy bites you can carry in your satchel to make long days feel shorter. Think Mesopotamian sour candy if your candy occasionally made you cry a little. Historians still argue whether tamarind and tamarisk were treated more as medicinal ingredients or everyday flavor enhancers. Some records lump them in with poultices and herbal teas. Others list them as part of temple meal plans and even diplomatic gift boxes. We may never know if a Babylonian king once tried to bribe an Elamite envoy with a fruit roll-up. Quirky discovery. A half-burned scroll from a traveling apothecary includes a recipe for chill tongue paste made of tamarind fig skins and river salt. Whether it was for cooking or for shutting up loud neighbors is still up for debate. You take another bite of the tamarind ball, and this time your mouth doesn't panic, it adapts. The sour becomes an awakening, a lightning bolt in edible form. The kids around you laugh not at you but with you, because tamarind always wins, eventually. A small girl hands you a slice of something softer. A reed-wrapped snack made with tamarind date syrup and ground chickpeas. It looks like a sandwich that lost its structural integrity in a heat wave. You try it. It's chewy, tart, sweet, and almost floral. It makes your eyebrows twitch. You nod approvingly, and she beams like she's just bested you in a snack duel. Nearby, someone is stirring a clay pot filled with bubbling tamarind pulp and mint leaves, muttering about digestion. You don't ask for details. The mix smells like a throat lozenge trapped in a forest. You sit by the stream, surrounded by the crackle of reed stalks and the sharp zip of tartness on your tongue. Tamarind is not comforting. It's not cozy, but it's real. It's alive. It demands attention, and you give it. And somehow that makes it unforgettable. The reed fields sway behind you now, and your mouth finally adjusting to the emotional roller coaster that is tamarind rests in contemplative silence. You follow a worn footpath that coils past cracked irrigation ditches and low, sun-dried walls until the air starts to smell warm. Not hot, but warm in a cozy sleepover kind of way. Nutty, buttery, slightly singed. You're approaching a bakery or what passes for one, an open-air clay oven beside a mud brick house tended by a man with forearms like amphorae and a patience forged in fire. He's flipping thin golden discs of what looks like barley pancakes. Not the fluffy brunch kind, mind you. These are flat, durable, and somewhere between a crepe and a tortilla's older, chewier cousin. They smell incredible. Toasted grain and wood smoke with the faintest whisper of fennel. One rests on a reed mat to cool, and you're invited to try it without ceremony. You tear off a piece. It's warm, pliable, and speckled with char marks. The flavor deep and earthy, like what you'd imagine a well-behaved field would taste like if you cooked it just right. A whisper of salt, a flicker of sesame, and the distinct feeling that you've eaten something that could survive both time and taxation. Barley was a staple grain in Mesopotamia, more than wheat, more than rice, which wasn't really a thing here, more than anything, really. It made beer, bread, and occasionally questionable pudding. These barley pancakes, called apu, were common fare for workers and priests alike. Thick enough to fill you, thin enough to stack 12 in a pouch and pretend it was variety. Historians still argue whether they were more of a travel food or part of temple rations. Some texts suggest offerings included stacks of these pancakes alongside jugs of beer, hinting at divine brunches. Others list them in worker wages, 50 pancakes per week plus onions, if the overseer was in a good mood. Quirky side note: one half-faded temple mural shows a line of men solemnly carrying pancake stacks on their heads during a festival. One appears to have dropped his. A tiny ghost in the corner looks disappointed. Whether symbolic or just a prank is unclear. You watch the baker smear a barley pancake with a soft date paste and fold it like a love letter. Another he tops with crushed pistachios and a dash of goat cheese wrapped in a little scroll and pinned with a sprig of mint. The combinations are humble but inventive ancient Lunchables with better fiber content. Children run by each clutching a rolled pancake like it's a sacred scroll. One boy has clearly added honey and is now fighting gravity and ants simultaneously. You ask the baker if he gets bored. He shrugs. You wake up. You make fire. You flip. The gods eat. The kids complain. The end. You take another bite. This one's cooled slightly, the edges now firmer, almost crisp. The texture is soothing, substantial, but yielding like a good friend who lets you vent for too long. The baker offers you one to take. You fold it into your satchel, and it feels like tucking away a piece of history, quiet, edible, and gently toasted. You walk on the scent lingering on your sleeves, and somewhere in the distance a temple bell rings, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to remind you even the gods might be craving pancakes today. Your satchel is now heavier by one barley pancake, and your spirit slightly lighter. The road you follow dips toward a waterway lined with cracked stone jetties and barges rocking lazily in the murky current. Somewhere nearby, something is bubbling, something thick, something brown. You follow the steam trail and stumble upon a clay cauldron the size of a very ambitious toddler. A stout woman with a sun-creased face stands beside it, stirring slowly with a paddle that could double as a boat oar. She catches your eye and grins. Bean mash, breakfast of heroes, or civil accountants. You lean closer. The cauldron emits a comforting, earthy aroma. It's a mixture of fava beans, mashed, stewed, possibly reprimanded into submission, flavored with garlic leeks and what might be crushed coriander or possibly someone's dreams. She ladles a dollop into a flat clay bowl and adds a dash of thick yogurt and a sprinkle of something crunchy. You taste. It's hearty, dense, rich, slightly sour from the yogurt, savory from the leeks, and comforting in a way only meals made with paddles can be. It doesn't sing. It hums. The flavor stays low in your chest like a hug made out of legumes. Fava beans, sometimes called herbati, were one of the oldest known staples in Mesopotamian cooking. They were dried, boiled, mashed, or even roasted over open flames. This mash version, according to some surviving records, was often served during colder months or as morning sustenance before major temple rituals. Historians still argue whether this dish had religious associations or was merely common comfort food. One record from Ur speaks of a ceremonial bean offering in a spring festival, while another tablet simply lists 4 jars mash for scribes, 1 for arguing priests. That's right, snack logistics show up everywhere. Quirky tidbit. A scribbled complaint from a traveling magistrate once read, "This inn offers bean mash without salt." I wept. The ox beside me wept. So at least the seasoning debates are eternal. A small boy near the pot dips a shard of bread into the mash and offers you a grin with 3 teeth and no regrets. You mimic him using your remaining barley pancake like a spoon. The mash clings to it stubborn and thick, but the pairing works like ancient alchemy. The cook hums as she stirs, occasionally swatting flies and encouraging the fire with quiet curses. A clay jar beside her holds a mixture of fermented yogurt and herbs that she drizzles over some bowls, and not others, apparently based on mood or social standing. You get the drizzle. You're flattered. You sit beside the fire bowl and lap, watching steam curl into the morning air like slow ideas. The mash settles deep in your belly, calming, grounding, convincing your muscles that maybe, just maybe, nothing terrible will happen today. Someone begins playing a slow melody on a reed flute nearby. The tune matches the texture of the mash. Soft, circular, a little flat but deeply sincere. And for a moment, sitting there with garlic on your breath and warmth in your ribs, you feel exactly where you should be. Not at the palace, not in the market, but at the edge of a muddy river sharing bean mash with strangers who have never read your name but would probably feed you again anyway. The bowl of bean mash is empty now, save for one stubborn smear clinging to the side like a retired politician refusing to vacate office. You leave it beside a row of washed-out clay pots, nod to the cook, and make your way along a shady path hemmed in by crumbling walls and low, thorny shrubs. There's laughter ahead, light musical, the kind that sounds like something's either gone hilariously wrong or refreshingly right. You round the bend and see a group of teenage girls gathered around what appears to be a makeshift cooking game. They're shaping small, doughy spheres and dropping them carefully into hot oil bubbling over a wide, shallow hearth. The result: crisp golden morsels dusted with ground dried rose petals and what might be sugar or the closest Mesopotamian cousin. You've just stumbled into a batch of date fritters. The lead girl sees your interest and smirks. They're still hot. You break a tooth, it's your own curse. You accept one without hesitation because you're brave like that. The outer crust crunches beneath your teeth. Light slightly. Smoky, kissed by oil that's seen more snacks than a temple accountant at year-end feasts. Inside it's sticky and sweet. Mashed dates, flour, crushed nuts, maybe a whisper of saffron if someone's aunt smuggled it home from a cousin's dowry basket. These fritters, sometimes referred to as shikaru, were festive treats, not everyday fuel, but delicacies prepared during harvest celebrations, family weddings, and we survived the taxes again banquets. They were both indulgent and clever, a way to stretch dates and grain into something celebratory without inviting divine judgment for extravagance. Historians still argue whether the recipe originated in Akkadian kitchens or Sumerian granaries, and whether the addition of spices meant you were upper middle class or just very lucky that day. One ancient ledger notes the use of 7 drops of spice oil, which is either very specific or just someone flexing how little they use to make it special. Quirky fact: a scribe once scribbled a riddle on the side of a temple stone: I am sweet, but I come from pits. I crisp, but never burn. I vanish between laughter and teeth. What am I? Most interpreted as a poetic ode to date fritters. One dissenting scholar insists it's about a goat. That guy doesn't get invited to dessert debates anymore. You watch the girls pass fritters between bites of gossip and bursts of laughter. One sprinkles her fritter with what looks like powdered fennel, another drizzles it with melted clarified butter from a tiny shell cup. No two are the same. That seems to be the point. You take a second for science. It's somehow better than the first, warmer, messier with a chunk of walnut hidden like a surprise confession. The heat of the oil fades fast, but the date's sticky sweetness lingers on your lips like a memory you're not quite ready to let go of. Someone hands you a third. You pretend to resist. You fail. Beside the hearth, a faded clay tablet rests against a woven basket. On it, half-scrawled, is what looks like a very early form of a recipe mixed with joy. Fry with care. Eat before brothers arrive. A line of wisdom that has not aged a day. A breeze ruffles the girls' veils as they laugh again, tossing crushed rose petals into the air. letting them fall where they may on fritters, on stone, on memories. And you, chewing slowly, feel the years crumble like golden crust. You leave the warmth of the fritter hearth reluctantly, your fingers faintly sticky, your pockets suspiciously heavier than before. The stone path snakes into a courtyard flanked by tall temple walls, solemn, silent, dust-colored monoliths rising like ancient promises. Inside, a hush lives here. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of waiting. A priest with brows like thunderclouds nods once and gestures you inside. You remove your sandals because, honestly, everyone else is doing it and your feet could probably use a penance anyway. The air is cool and thick with the scent of sandalwood old incense and slightly overripe figs. In the center of the chamber, a long table covered with cloth reed baskets, polished stone plates and food. Not feasts, not banquets, offerings, compact, fragrant, precise. You recognize many barley cakes, dates, nuts, honey, cheese, but arranged so delicately, so symbolically that they feel more like words than food. This is temple snackdom. You approach carefully, and a young priestess murmurs that today is a shared day, meaning some of the offerings can be distributed to the community, specifically the lucky few who happen to wander in during snack hour. You pretend not to beam. She hands you a small reed cone wrapped tightly with thread. Inside, a miniature fig mash pastry, rich and sticky, scented with clove and what may be crushed pine. The outer layer is made from finely ground flour and barley fat pressed together until it holds like shortbread. It crumbles into memory between your teeth. According to scribal records, priests and high officials often dined on these items between ceremonies. Offerings were made not just to gods, but also to maintain temple staff, including the surprisingly snack-dependent choir boys. Food logistics were recorded meticulously, every fig nut and cracked wheat biscuit accounted for. Bureaucracy has always been hungry. Historians still argue whether certain items were eaten as divine communion or simply because we can't let the good cheese rot. Some rituals included specific phrases said before partaking, almost like grace, but more poetic. To the one who splits the sky we chew goes one dusty line, quirky tidbit. One temple fragment records a scuffle between two junior priests over a missing honey cake. The account ends with, and then both were assigned extra incense duties, for their hands were quicker than their thoughts. You're offered a clay cup of wine, not the festival chug kind, but thin-spiced, meant to be sipped. It's paired with a square of pressed grains soaked lightly in the wine itself and left to dry, forming a chewy, tangy bar that's as close to divine trail mix as you're going to get. A priest nearby quietly rearranges the reed cones, ensuring the alignment matches some invisible logic. Only the divine or particularly fastidious archivists understand. He pauses briefly to offer you a square of pomegranate seed brittle, a mosaic of red seeds suspended in hardened date syrup. It crunches with intent. The chamber doesn't feel holy in the thunder and lightning sense. It feels sacred in the quiet hum of care, repetition, and meaningful chewing. These aren't snacks of indulgence. They're acts of memory, devotion, and ancient scheduling. You sit against a smooth stone pillar, nibbling respectfully. Someone is humming softly. You don't understand the words, but the melody wraps around the edges of your heart like a warm reed basket. Safe, familiar, forgotten. Outside, the sun blinks behind clouds like a bashful deity. Inside, you crunch pomegranate seeds and count the seconds between silence and the next small miracle of flavor. The fig mash pastry settles like velvet in your stomach. You step out of the temple chamber quietly, the brittle still sweet on your tongue, the hush of ritual trailing behind you like an old scarf. Outside, the light has shifted, golden, slanted like the day has exhaled. You wander now, without direction, your steps loose, unhurried, your mind gently tethered to your belly. You find yourself in a quieter part of the city. Fewer merchants here, more walls, fewer calls, more chickens. A narrow alley opens into a courtyard where smoke rises in lazy ribbons from low clay domes. Around them, families sit cross-legged chatting while working sticky dough with their hands and fingers. A girl with a flour-dusted chin points to a stone slab topped with what looks like spiced date bars. You pretend to hesitate, but everyone knows how this ends. You're handed a thick, palm-sized, square, dense, sun-warmed flecked with crushed sesame and cumin. The top glistens slightly, either from a drizzle of honey or the ambition of someone who didn't know when to stop brushing oil. You bite. It's sweet, but not saccharine, like dates that have seen the world made mistakes and learned subtlety. There's texture from chopped nuts, likely walnuts, maybe almonds, and a whisper of cinnamon cardamom or something warmly mysterious. The flavor doesn't dance. It stretches out luxuriously across your tongue as if reclining. This is kadut, or something very close to it. Recipes vary wildly depending on which archaeologist you ask. Some think the name refers to all date-based desserts, others believe it's a specific layered preparation involving clarified butter-ground barley and philosophical arguments. Historians still argue whether kadut was a festive treat or a preservation method, a way of turning perishable fruit into long-lasting, snackable energy bricks. Some temples stored huge quantities in sealed jars supposedly for famine preparation. Others suggest it was just convenient backpack candy for traveling scribes with sweet teeth. Quirky mention. One dusty ledger includes a note. Took 3 kadut, gave 1 to goat displeased. No further context, possibly the first recorded instance of a failed snack review. A woman nearby offers you a sample of the good one, a version with saffron ground pistachio, and what she claims is air from a lucky breeze. You nod, take the square, and wonder how many ancient snack recipes included luck as a measurable ingredient. It's divine. Slightly chewy with crunchy edges and a flavor that blooms slowly. You imagine it tucked into a satchel, alongside scrolls and regrets. You imagine it shared under the stars, one bite at a time among tired travelers who know that dessert isn't a luxury. It's a portable reminder that life still has sweetness in it. A child walks by with a wooden tray piled high with similar bars heading off to a local temple, or possibly a very spoiled goat. You don't ask. You sit under a fig tree whose fruit glows in the fading light, licking your fingers and watching shadows grow long and soft. The courtyard feels older than the rest of the city, and the laughter here is quieter, richer. It doesn't chase your attention, it draws you in slowly like the bars themselves. You pocket one more piece, because you're practical, and because you know the future will be grateful. And as the wind shifts, carrying the smell of toasting flour and crushed dates, you wonder how many other sweet things history has forgotten, not out of cruelty, but simply because they were eaten too quickly to be written down. You rise from the shade of the fig tree with crumbs on your shirt and contentment stitched into the soles of your feet. The courtyard recedes behind you as you follow a winding trail past terraces and irrigation channels where reeds hum quietly and frogs chorus in the ditches with the kind of rhythm only nature can maintain for free. The breeze carries something unusual now. Not sour, not sweet, something pungent, tangy, and faintly salty. You follow it with the same instinct that's guided you through this ancient tasting menu and arrive at a modest stall made from reed mats and linen strips. There a man is serving pickled fish snacks. Yes, you heard that correctly. Small dried fish marinated in a concoction of vinegar, herbs, and something dark that smells both curious and persuasive. He hands you a skewer with a knowing grin. For the brave and the bored, he says, you are obviously both. You bite. It is complex. Salty, yes, but not sharp. There's a background sweetness from date syrup, a burst of something lemony sumac or wild citrus peel, and a finish that tingles like gossip. The fish is chewy, slightly leathery, and if flavor were a metaphor, this would be a scroll left out in the sun too long, but still worth reading. Fish were a key component of Mesopotamian diets, especially those living along the Tigris and Euphrates. Most were dried, smoked, or pickled to survive transport and time. And some, like these spicy pickled versions, were turned into snacks, not unlike modern jerky, but with more literary flair and bones. Historians still argue whether such fish dishes were popularized by port cities like Eridu or more inland temple economies. Some clay tablets list 7 dried fish per mason per sun, while others reserve them for festival use. One theory even suggests some pickled fish were used as divination tools, with their placement in bowls symbolizing future fortunes or indigestion. Quirky tidbit. A recipe fragment from an unknown cook includes the instruction, "Do not blink while stirring or fish will remember." Is this metaphor cursed cooking? No one knows. But several modern recreations report absolutely blinking just in case. The man now offers you a complimentary bite of soured milk curd, not quite yogurt, not quite cheese. It's tangy, smooth, a little funky, and makes the fish seem shyer by comparison. You swirl the two together on a reed cracker and instantly understand why ancient dock workers swore by it. Salt, cream, zing, texture. It's a flavor palette that shouldn't work but absolutely does, like a duet between a baritone goat and a soprano fig. Nearby, a cat eyes you with deep suspicion. You offer a bit of fish. The cat declines. You feel judged. You stand at the edge of the reed swamp, now mouth full of contradiction, and the sky melts into the quiet, dreamy gold of day's end. People pass, carrying baskets and jugs, trays and tools. Some glance at your snack combo with approval. Others shake their heads. You're part of the conversation now, an edible debate in motion. As the breeze rustles through the papyrus and a distant boat horn echoes across the river, you take one last bite. The fish, the curd, the cracker. It's an ending, a full stop in flavor form. And yet somehow it feels more like a comma. And now, as the sun finally slips behind the mud brick rooftops and the reed stalks whisper their sleepy songs, you find a quiet place beside the water's edge. The day has softened. The warmth fades from the air, leaving behind only the scent of ash figs and fermented stories. Your fingers rest against the folds of your satchel, still filled with crumbs, wrapped leaves, and one very patient date bar. Around you, the city murmurs low and far away like a lullaby written in footsteps and laughter. The clay paths are cool now, the frogs quieter. The breeze gentle as a mother's hand brushing your hair back from your forehead, soothing the space between taste and memory. The gods, if they are watching, do not speak, but perhaps they smile. Somewhere in the dark, someone sings. Just a hum, just a thread of song stretched thin across the reeds. You close your eyes and breathe it in, letting the rhythm settle in your chest, slow and steady. The kind of rhythm that says, you've eaten well, you've wandered far, and now it's time to rest. Sleep, ancient traveler. The snacks will be here tomorrow.